Welcome to Figure Feedback. My name is Jeremy, and today I wanted to give you my review of my personal experience with the Flashforge Creator 5 Pro. This is the more expensive version in the Creator 5 series because this one, not only is it enclosed, but it also has a heated chamber that can go up to 65 degrees Celsius. That's compared to the less expensive version of this, which is the regular Creator 5 that does not have a heated chamber and is not enclosed by default. If you're interested in that less expensive version, I will leave links in the description and I'll put a card on the screen so you can take a look at that printer. But if you are more interested in printing with some more engineering quality materials, things that really benefit from having an enclosed chamber like this one, then this will be the printer that you would be more interested in checking out. Right now, Flashforge is selling this printer for $849 over on their website at the time that I record this video. As you know that those prices can fluctuate depending on what's going on at any given time. So you can just check the links in the description. It'll take you over to where you can get this at Flashforge's website, and you can see what the price is when you look at it. The original Creator 5 is also available on Amazon right now, and this one is not, but I'd imagine that it'll be available over there soon enough as well. All right, so just kind of keep your eye open if you're looking for an alternative way to get this printer. So just like the original Creator 5, the non-enclosed version, this printer is special because it is one of a few printers on the market right now that has 4 independent tool heads that are each linked to one filament spool, meaning that the days of printing things in multiple colors and having to purge them after every time you want to change the filament are gone. Now you can just continue to print with 4 colors or 4 materials at the same time, and there will not be any purge waste. The only waste that you have to worry about really is the waste that comes from the prime tower, which is necessary in order for the nozzles to reach the appropriate amount of pressure so that they don't leave imperfections all on your print. Instead, all of that is just moved over to that prime tower. Besides that, that's the only waste that you get during a print. So right now on the market, if you want to get a printer that just uses this 4 independent tool head functionality, your options are this printer, the far more complicated and expensive Prusa XL, or the Snapmaker U1, which is a favorite by a lot of people out there, and for good reason. But unlike the Snapmaker U1, the Creator 5 has a heated chamber, whereas the Snapmaker U1 doesn't. So let's talk about the build volume. With this printer, it has a build volume of 256 millimeters cubed, which for a long time was like the standard for a normal 3D printer. These days, people are looking for something a little bit bigger than 256, but 256 will still take care of the vast majority of things that most people are trying to print. As far as speed goes, you're not going to be seeing a whole lot of difference between this and other printers on the market, modern printers. Flashforge says that this has a maximum acceleration of 30,000 millimeters per second squared, and then the maximum print speed is going to be 600 millimeters per second. But the vast majority of the time, you're not going to be printing that fast. You're going to be printing slower than that. But if you were to compare this to any other similar printer on the market, it's not going to be that much faster and it's not going to be that much slower. So to me, that's really not something to really write home about. But when you do get this printer, one of the first things that you are going to notice that I appreciate it as well is how simple it is to put together, despite the fact that you're dealing with these 4 tool heads, and it makes the whole thing seem like it's going to be intimidating. But if there is one thing that Flashforge is absolutely nailed with this printer and the other Creator 5, it's just how user-friendly it is to get it all set up. It's mostly assembled right out of the box. Just a few things that you have to do to get everything up and running. For example, the screen is detached when you first get it, to protect it in shipping, but there's no ribbon cable. So you don't have to fiddle around with anything. It literally just plugs right into the front of the frame, and then using a couple screws, you secure it so it doesn't fall off. Really simple. And when it comes to the tool heads, all of that is already pre-assembled in the box. You don't need to connect any tubes. You don't have to connect any wiring. It's all connected together. All you do is just slot it in on the left side. It slots in nice and flush. And again, you use a couple of screws to secure it to make sure that it doesn't go anywhere. Then you have the black cable that you have to connect to the tool head. And again, use a couple of screws to make sure everything is cinched down. And then when it comes to the spool holders on the side, it's the same thing. You put them in their place, then you got to grab another screw, tighten it down, make sure that they don't go anywhere. It's one of the simplest installations for a 3D printer of its kind, especially if you want to compare it to the Snapmaker U1. It is way easier and a lot faster to put together. So you'll be up and running really in no time. But the only big difference in the assembly process between this and the original Creator is the lid that goes on top. So you'll need that in order to keep the heat in when you use the heated chamber. Now, this isn't like a really elegant solution, but it does work. This comes in 4 different panels inside of the box, and then it has these longer connector pieces that you have to put together like a simple puzzle. You just slide one panel into the long black part, and then you can connect the other panels to it. And then again, just using some screws, you have to connect them down in the corners to make sure that the whole thing just stays in place. Then you'll notice when you flip it up, it has these little notches right here that correspond to these openings that's on the back of the printer and on the front of the printer. So then you just pop it on just like a hat. And it is tall enough so that these wires don't get smushed and they don't get pinched, so there's enough clearance right there. And then you can just leave the hat on. You can just leave it on there indefinitely. Even when you need to change out the filament, I originally thought that you would have to take the lid off in order to get to the tool heads, but you can just open up the front door and reach in there and just do whatever it is that you were going to do anyway. So you can just leave the lid on. But because this gives the printer more height, you are going to have to make sure that whatever you want to put this, you have enough clearance in order to accommodate for this extra space on top. Now, because this is an enclosed printer, you're supposed to be printing with some more engineering materials. You also need to have the proper temperatures and the appropriate hardware with the nozzles in order to really maximize your potential with those materials. So when it comes to the bed, it can go all the way up to 120 degrees Celsius. And when it comes to the hot end can go all the way up to 320 degrees Celsius. And by default, all of these come with 0.4 millimeter nozzles, but they are also hardened steel. So right out of the gate, if you have some materials that are somewhat abrasive, you can print with those without worrying about destroying your nozzles really quickly, because like everything is just set up for you. So you can immediately go in and start printing with the materials that you want to print with. Now, when it comes to airflow, a good thing about this is you don't have to leave the door open or take the top off when you're going to be printing things like PLA, for example, because PLA doesn't like all of that heat constantly surrounding it, because this does have a way for the air to be drawn in from the side on this side, and then it will filter over the print and it will exhaust from the left side. So that will allow you to keep this door and the hat on whenever you're printing with those materials. And when you are printing with other materials that might give off a little bit of a smell, ABS, ASA, stuff like that, it does have a HEPA 13 filter on the inside as well to just sort of help to manage that. But I do have to tell you, no matter what printer I have tried that has been enclosed, that has all of these different filters and coconut shells and all this other stuff, activated carbon, Every time I print it with the material that gives off fumes like ABS or ASA, I have been able to smell it. And the same thing is true with the Creator 5 Pro. It is going to depend on the type of filament that you're using. When I try to print with some PP ABS filament from Inslogic, it has a very low odor and you can't smell it all that good. But at the same time, if I use Inslogic's regular black ASA filament, I can smell that pretty darn good. The smell, of course, gets worse if you open up the door and all of it just kind of comes out. But as the printer is running, there is a very good chance that you're still going to smell that nasty styrene odor that comes from those filaments. So just be aware of that. This is not something that you want to put in an enclosed space where you're going to be breathing in. Make sure that you're in a well ventilated place. And if you want, you can also have it set up so that you can exhaust fumes like from the outside, like put it in a grow tent or something like that. You can do that. But I just want to let you know, there's definitely still going to be a smell. So since you're going to be using this with the heated chamber to print with those materials, I'm sure that you've probably heard the controversy surrounding this printer and really the way that Flashforge designed it, which was not very good when it comes to it purging filament. Now, granted, it does not purge filament while you are printing. That's what the 4 tool heads are for. That's the benefit of it. But whenever you load new filament into this printer, it is still going to purge so that it can get rid of whatever the previous filament was, and it can make sure that it's feeding just the pure new filament that you want to use through the nozzle, to help avoid contamination. The problem is that when this printer was first released, they made it so that the purge went to the front of the build plate, and Flashforge also failed to provide a useful way to collect that filament as it purged. The whole thing just purged right onto the floor of the printer. There was no box, there was no nothing, which was a really bad design choice, and turns out also a potentially dangerous one. You've probably seen the video or heard about the video from Elevated Makerspace that showed that when he purged filament with the heated chamber being active at the front of the plate, the filament got sucked into the chamber fan where the heating was taking place. And if that continues to happen, that can be very, very dangerous. So after he pointed that out, Flashforge did move rather quickly, and they put out a firmware update that disabled that fan while the filament was purging. A little bit of a band-aid. But then after that, they released another update that also kept the fan off, but moved the purging sequence to the back of the printer. So now whenever the printer purges, it no longer is in front of that fan, which is a good thing. However, in doing that, it also created another problem because the nozzle wiper that is on the front of the plate, there is no nozzle wiper on the back of the plate. And the whole point of that nozzle wiper was to get rid of the strand of filament that is still stuck to the nozzle so that it would not be drug across the printer. If you printed one of the filament collection boxes that many people in the community printed, then every time it would go to wipe the nozzle, it would just make sure that that filament was cleanly separated and it stayed inside of the basket. But since there's no filament wiper in the back, after it purges, it just drags, and that filament could go across the plate. The filament could be knocked to the bottom of the printer, or the filament could be taken with the nozzle and parked in the dock where the nozzle is going to rest. So there's really no way to predict what's going to happen with that filament that you purged now that there is no filament wiper to make sure that there's no nozzle wiper, I should say, it's to make sure that that filament falls in a very specific place. And that means that when this printer does purge, you're going to have to be next to it. So you can be sure that that filament is not on the bed, to make sure that it's not going into the holes where the lead screws are or kind of getting wrapped up in the lead screws, especially if you're going to be using the heated chamber, because you don't want all that extra filament to get so hot that it's starting to melt inside of the chamber and melting to the bottom or getting on those screws and then melting onto the screws. I mean, you see, it just created more problems. So I don't know what Flashforge is going to do about that, if anything at all at this point. But if you do get this printer, just know that when you start a print and it starts to purge a little bit, you're going to have to be there to watch it to make sure that you grab the filament that it does purge, just to prevent something like that from happening. My hope is that in a future update, they make it so that this printer does not purge before every single print, because that's what it does. It doesn't purge a whole lot, but it purges some. Even if you've already used that same tool head with that same filament and you just wanted to print the same thing over and over and over again, it's still going to purge a little bit before every print. They need to take that out, or at least make it do something else other than just purging directly down onto the base of the printer like it wants to. Maybe just put that all in a prime tower, maybe make the starting purge line longer, something so that you don't have to constantly babysit it like that. Once you get through all of that, if you do want to monitor your prints, this does have a built-in camera that you can use to look at your prints as they are printing. You can monitor them either through the Flash Studio slicer that Flashforge has for this printer. Is just Orca Slicer, just rescanned, and it's got some Flashforge specific features built in. You can look at it that way. Or if you want to put the Flash Studio app on your phone, you can also look at it that way as well. It's not the greatest quality camera in the world, and the frame rate is also not all that good. But when it comes to just seeing what your print is doing to see like if it has failed, then it does this job in letting you see that. It also has a built-in chamber light that is very, very blue, so it's not really daylight balanced. It's very, very blue. And when you're looking at it through your monitor, it is still bright enough for you to be able to see what's going on. So let's just talk about what it's like actually using the printer once you get past all of that other stuff that I talked about. Using this printer has been a very pleasant experience for me, and I have been fortunate to dodge the main problems that I've seen some other people have online. One of the problems that I've seen cropping up is a MCU connection error that some people have been getting, that has been the result of either turning off the prime tower, or even if you had the prime tower on, it would still just happen. I don't know what triggers it, but fortunately I have not had that issue, though I am aware of it, but it's just nothing that I have seen personally. But ever since I got this printer, from the moment I turned it on and went through the calibrations with the vibration compensation and the leveling and the extruder calibration, everything has just gone very, very smoothly from the normal printing process. I haven't gotten like crazy errors that prevented me from doing anything. The biggest issue that I've had with this printer has to do with nozzle clogging. It hasn't happened often, but it's something that's also happened on the previous Creator 5, the one that's not enclosed, and it makes me wonder like what exactly is going on here. And it usually just happens if you pause the print and then you go to resume the print. So let's say you ran out of filament and you wanted to put some more filament in, or let's say you want to do a 5-color print, but there's only 4 spools. So you wait until one spool is completely done, and then you go in, you pause it, you put some new filament in, you load it, and then you go to continue the print. I've done that, and every time I have done that, it would print for a few seconds, and then the printer will tell me that a clog is detected. But there's no actual clog. I would just tell it to resume. It would resume, it would finish the print, though you would still see a little seam line where the nozzle clog was said to have occurred. And you can see that here in a couple of these images of this Pikachu and on Frieza's tail, where clogs were detected in those 2 parts. And then once they resumed and finished, they left a line in their wake. Now, I'm not sure exactly what's going on with that. It's done that with different types of filament. So you can just turn the clog detection off. But then if you do that, if you actually do have a clog, then you will run into problems. I have experienced real clogs with this using some of Sunlu's matte black high speed PLA filament, which legitimately did cause a clog on both this printer and the original Creator 5, has been evidenced by the ways that you identify clogs, such as, no filament coming out, or when it does come out, it just sort of goes sideways. It produces like a bit of a partial clog. So clog detection does work, but there's also something kind of weird going on where it would tell you that there's a clog, even if I believe there's no real clog to be had. Another thing about this printer that it doesn't have that I wish that it did have, clog detection is nice, but it doesn't have spaghetti detection. It doesn't have failure detection. It doesn't have object detection, something that will tell you if something was on the build plate before a print starts to prevent you from breaking anything. None of those features are present on this printer, and I'm not sure why. Instead, it seems that Flashforge is outsourcing that to a program called Obico, which does the monitoring for you, and then it will send you a notification if it detects something like that. The only thing with Obico is if you really want to it to monitor your prints for long periods of time, then you have to pay for the credits in order to do that. The other thing with Obico is it requires a connection to your printer that right now, to my knowledge, Flashforge does not allow the end user to have access to, so that you can give that information to Obico, because that is an open source program. So you can't just SSH into this printer and give it everything that it needs to connect it to Obico. So even though that logo is there in the slicer, you can't actually use it. Maybe that's coming in the future. I don't know, but right now you just cannot use it. Which brings me to the very next point with this printer, and that is the software that controls it. Now, you should know that if you want to get this printer, or really any modern Flashforge printer, it's not open. So please do not expect it to be. And what I mean by that is, even though it runs Clipper, it's Flashforge's modifications of Clipper. And no, they haven't made those things public. And yes, it's likely in violation of something, but it's the way that this has been going for years, and it has not stopped. So if you wanted to go into Clipper and you wanted to change up some lines of code, if you want to go in yourself and write something or delete something to prevent the printer from purging before every print, or if you wanted to change the order of operations, you wanted to add something or subtract something, you cannot do that with this printer. It is locked down from that software perspective and being able to access the clipperiness of it. If that's something that you don't know about, you don't care about, you just want to know how well does it print, I don't care about all the other stuff, then you'll be just fine with this. But if you want more control, just know this printer is not going to give you that kind of control. Some control that you do have, however, is if you want to use a different slicer that is not Flash Studio, you can. This completely supports Orca Slicer. It has a LAN mode. You can use LAN mode through Orca Slicer. You can also, at least right now, you can use this third-party application called Flashforge UI that will allow you to tap into the camera. It'll allow you to change your temperatures. It'll allow you to see what's on the printer and select a file that you've already printed previously, and then print that and upload new files to print. You can do all of that while being completely disconnected from Flashforge's cloud. It does not require any hacking or anything like that. It's just a community-made program that I'll link to in the description. And by using those two things, you can just divorce yourself from the Flash Studio and from the Flashforge cloud to give you some kind of control if that's what you really want. But what about the actual printing? Man, let me tell you, I have had really good experience printing with this particular printer. The quality of the prints that I've gotten, they've been good. If you want to compare it to the Snapmaker U1, I felt that the Snapmaker U1 has a slight edge when it comes to your print quality when you leave everything default. If you were to tweak your filament settings and try to get the most perfect everything, then yes, you can make this be just as good, if not better, than any other printer that's sold on the market today. But right now, for most people, they aren't going to be trying to calibrate every single filament that they use. Doing that takes way too much time, takes way too much effort. So if you just leave the filament settings as they are on default, you're still going to get some good looking print. And that's with PLA that I've used, PETG that I use, ASA, ABS, polycarbonate. They've all worked very, very, very well on this printer. As far as that heated chamber goes, every time I've used it, I've made sure that the chamber heated up to 65 degrees Celsius. And when it starts that purging process, it'll make sure that that fan and that heater is off, but then after that, it will start to climb. So in my experience here in this space, since it is the summertime, when I turn the printer on, the internal chamber temperature is already somewhere around 27 to 30 degrees Celsius. So when I set it to 65, it'll take around 15 minutes or so for it to get up to about 61 to 62 degrees Celsius. And then the printer starts its leveling process. It probes across the entire plate. It doesn't just probe the area where your prints are going to be. That's something that I would prefer just to cut down on time. But heating that chamber up to 65 degrees Celsius takes around that amount of time. So be expected to have it all done in like 20 minutes, including like the leveling. And the temperature stays stable throughout that entire process. Now, I never took an independent thermometer and stuck it in there to make sure it was 65 degrees Celsius, but whatever temperature it was good enough to make sure that that ASA and that ABS was stuck to the build plate and it wasn't warping. I haven't had any warping problems with this printer, and I never use any additives on the build plate, never any glue, never any hairspray, any of those old world solutions to making sure that your prints stick. I've never done that, and everything has just always turned out to be very, very good. So let's take a look at some examples here. So this is a battery box that I have to put in the spare batteries for the camera that I'm using right now. So I decided to use two different engineering filaments, but use them like in a multicolor sense, right? So the green is ASA, and then the white is the PC ABS, so polycarbonate ABS. Not for any kind of structural integrity. I just wanted to have the colors in using those engineering filaments because they stick together. And as you can see, the box turned out very nice. And I even used some bed screws from some previous printers that I have in order to make sure that the latches stay together. So they're not the right size screw, but darn it, it works. And I finally repurposed something that I kept my hands on. So it turned out good, with the exception of like the Panasonic logo. As you can see, it looks like there's a little bit of under extrusion there. All the white isn't completely filled in, but I also did not run the flow calibration before using that. So I used the same two filaments, only this time I used the flow calibration beforehand, and I printed another box. I printed an ammo box that you can see here, and it's got that same kind of thing going on. You know, it's got the green for most of the box, and then it's got the logo of what's in the box already printed on. And this came out looking a lot better than my Panasonic box. And I attributed that to the flow calibration because now it looks a lot more filled in. And these are put together with a few different pieces, so their tolerances were very good. They went together the way that they're supposed to go together. I've printed similar boxes like this on other printers like Bamboo Lab printers, which of course are renowned for good reason. And these also went together very, very well. So as far as your dimensional accuracy goes for stuff like this, it worked out just fine, and I'm happy with these. And on the inside of the box, that is printed with some regular ASA. Again, this black ASA, it did produce a smell, so that's something that you have to be aware of. But the printer handled it like a champ, and I didn't have any failures, and it didn't warp, didn't come out looking crazy. So, you know, it did a really, really good job, and I'm happy about that. But since I'm not really like an engineering kind of a guy, I also used a lot of different PLAs with this printer as well to make the things that I really, really like, such as figurines, and this time some pretty big figurines like this Frieza here that I printed on here. I mean, it just came out so good, with the exception of that clog that I got for the tail, so you can kind of see that line right there. But everything else I think turned out looking just really, really nice. And other prints that I've done on here, they've also turned out looking pretty good as well. And I've also connected a dryer box to this simply by putting it on the side and taking the filament from the dryer box and just sticking it straight up into the filament pathway on the left side, so I can continue to keep the filament dry as I printed with it. Some very hygroscopic filaments like PETG, for example. I've seen that there are some people who have created custom modifications so that you can make sure that your bare filament does not touch any outside air as you're feeding it into this printer. I haven't tried any of those, but it just goes to show you that there's some community support for this right now to help keep your filaments dry when you're printing with them, because otherwise they are going to be just sitting out in the open. And if you're using more hygroscopic filaments, then that's definitely going to be a problem depending on where you live. So those filament dry boxes are definitely going to help you. Flashforge has its own filament dry box that's supposed to integrate into this printer somehow, but we have no idea when it's coming out or how much it's going to be priced at. So for right now, you just have to go with another third-party solution that still works just as good. So my experience with this printer has been good, although it's definitely not without its faults. Its biggest faults really just being, in my opinion, big engineering oversights that never should have happened. Letting the printer purge to absolutely the abyss was the wrong thing to do, because not only did it prove to be unsafe, but it also created other problems when they attempted to fix it. So now you've got a nozzle wiper that does absolutely nothing. And that just makes the experience more of a hassle from a babysitting perspective when you shouldn't have had to do that in the first place. But if you want to use engineering materials, in my experience, it's worked out just fine. The heated chamber does what it's supposed to do, and it's not leaking a whole bunch of heat everywhere and causing the prints to fail. I've never had a problem with the purge tower falling over. My purge towers have held strong. I never changed anything. I don't know. Maybe I'm just lucky. I don't know why, but that's just been my experience with it. So if you're going to be using some engineering grade materials, I think that this is a safe bet for, as well as it can print. But if you're worried about any kind of mechanical oversights and what else is going on with this printer that they may have overlooked, then you may want to take a pause and just wait for some folks to really dive deep into this and take a look at the mechanics and see how things are routed. And, you know, because I'm no engineer, I can't tell you if something is soldered properly or not, but other people are, and they'll most likely look into it. So you'll be able to make an even better decision based on that. So that will be my recommendation for you. This is a printer that you would want if you don't care about the open source kind of nature of everything. If you don't care to tinker, if you don't care to mod, if you just want something that works, but you don't mind a little bit of babysitting, and you're looking at the price and you're like, for $849 and you want a tool changer, this is really one of the only ones on the market right now in that price range that has a heated chamber. Not even Snapmaker U1 has a heated chamber. So you can either wait to see who else offers something later down the line that has things more refined, or if you just can't wait, you can definitely go with this. And as far as the print quality goes, you're not going to be upset. You're not going to be disappointed, because it works very, very well. Now, you might get a good one. You could get a bad one. That type of thing happens. All right. But from my experience, this guy has been a little champ. All right. So that is it. If you're interested in this printer, You can take a look at the description. You can see what the current price is going to be. And I'm going to continue making more videos when it is relevant, when it comes to firmware updates and things that Flashforge has changed or adjusted, so I can kind of keep you updated with where they're going with all this, especially if they decide to make a revision of some sort. So that's going to do it for now. Till next time, take care of yourselves, and I'll speak to you soon.